My boyfriend's first love got cancer. Her dying wish was to have a wedding with him. They picked out the wedding dress together, chose the date, and decorated our house the way she liked. He told me to be good, to be understanding, and to give him a month. I really don't love her. I just want her to leave happy. But he doesn't know I'm dying too. Just got back from a checkup, hadn't even turned on the lights, and I was pinned against the door and kissed. Marry me. Ethan reeked of alcohol and started unbuttoning my shirt skillfully. Why all of a sudden? I hadn't recovered, instinctively wrapping my arms around his neck in response. We've been together for 5 years, and he's never mentioned marriage once. Whenever I brought it up, he'd always find an excuse to dodge. What's going on today? Nothing, just feel like I should make you a promise. His actions were swift and urgent. By the third button, he lost patience and pushed up my shirt. Just then, the phone rang. Ethan stiffened but continued kissing me, ignoring it. Aren't you gonna get that? I nudged him. He seemed to be challenging someone. No. But a few seconds later, he let go of me. Forget it, go take a shower first. With that, he took the phone to the balcony. The phone screen flashed with a name, Kelly, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. My heart sank. Now I understood why he was acting so strange tonight. When I finished showering, Ethan had ended the call and was sitting on the balcony smoking. Hearing my footsteps, he didn't turn around. He just calmly told me, Kelly's back. She's sick and refuses treatment. Tonight at a class reunion, she wouldn't agree to get hospitalized unless I married her. No wonder. He rarely smokes, yet the ashtray next to him was filled with cigarette butts. I tightened my grip on the towel. So, what then? Did he agree? Was he planning to not marry me anymore? Or did he want to leave this decision to me, hoping I'd back off? Ethan took a breath, clearly in a bad mood. There's no then. I refused, he said while stubbing out his cigarette and heading to the room. Get some sleep. I'm exhausted today. I watched his back as he lay on the bed, feeling like a cotton ball was stuck in my chest. Why didn't he say he refused? Why do I still feel so awful? The next morning, I was woken up by the doorbell ringing frantically. What are you doing here? Ethan was already up and yelling at the unexpected guest outside. In an instant, I was wide awake. Simultaneously, a female voice, sounding tearful, came through. Ethan, this is the place we lived together. You bought it, so you must still have feelings for me, right? I came back just for you. My mind buzzed. Something snapped. The second year after Ethan and I started dating, his career took off. The first thing he did with his earnings was buy this house we're living in now. I found it odd back then, because this place was far from his work and not very convenient. He told me he liked the environment. Most importantly, he just liked it. Thinking back to the unintentional smile he had when saying that, the chill ran through me. Did he truly like the environment here? Or the person he once lived with here? I threw on a shawl and walked out, hearing Ethan flatly refuse. No way. I have a girlfriend now. We're getting married soon. I can't marry you. Ethan's answer somewhat reassured me. No matter his past, he chose to be with me now. The girl at the door widened her eyes in disbelief, seeing me through his shoulders, tears flooding her face. Sorry for bothering you. She looked at Ethan in despair. Even if I die, I'll always love you. Those heartbreaking words made Ethan's back stiffen. The girl ran off in tears. I had just reached Ethan's side, reaching to hold his hand. You. The next second, Ethan dodged, looking at me with a mix of pain and guilt. Joe, I'm sorry. I can't just let her go through this alone. I froze, pain spreading through my body like an electric shock. By the time I realized, Ethan had rushed out. I mechanically followed him, seeing him clasp the struggling girl tightly, his voice trembling, almost sobbing. Kelly, can we not do this? Please listen. I promise to marry you. This was an Ethan I had never seen before, gentle and humble, so different from his usual cold and composed self. At that moment, I knew I had lost. When Ethan returned, I was packing my luggage in the room. Joe, what are you doing? He rushed over, panicking, trying to stop me from taking clothes out of the wardrobe. I calmly told him I wanted to break up, but he got angry. Joe, I won't break up with you. You can't leave me. Saying that, he kissed me hard, with anger and frustration. Slap. I slapped him hard. Ethan, you promised to marry her, but won't break up with me, planning to have both of us. My voice trembled. I'd never been this furious with him. I remembered our first date, when before we even met, I got harassed by some thugs, and he appeared like a savior, shielding me with a stern expression. When my nose hit his back, I smelled his unique, fresh cologne, like a cedar tree covered in snow in the harsh winter wind. From that moment, I liked him. At this moment, Ethan sat helplessly on the bed, clutching his hair, mumbling, "What can I do? Kelly is sick. The doctor said it's terminal. She only has a month left. I don't want her to leave with regrets." I stood there, dumbfounded, watching him as he sobbed quietly, breaking down emotionally. All those questions I had for him suddenly seemed impossible to ask. Should I accuse him of being two-faced and fickle, or tell him not to marry someone else? But that woman is terminally ill. What am I fighting with a dying person for? The atmosphere became suddenly quiet. Ethan saw that I wasn't speaking and tried to negotiate again. He took a deep breath, his eyes red as he hugged me. Joe, just 1 month. Just give me 1 month. I really don't love her. I just want her to leave happily. At this point, what could I say? We've been together for 5 years. Ethan and I always got along well. Now, finally, we were about to get married, and I didn't want to give up on this relationship because of someone who was going to die. I looked up, holding back my tears, and pried his arms off me. Okay, I'll give you 1 month. After agreeing to the marriage, Kelly indeed agreed to stay in the hospital quietly. Ethan seemed much more cheerful. He went straight to the hospital after work every day for several days. When he came home at night, exhausted, he buried his head in my hair. Joe, I'm so tired. My hand paused as I massaged his neck. Who's to blame? Who told him to care for 2 women at the same time? The next day, I suggested going to the hospital to visit, thinking Ethan wouldn't agree. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation. I felt a bit relieved. Not avoiding me meeting her meant he wasn't hiding anything from me. Ethan even said he'd drop by to pick me up after work, but after work, I waited and waited, and he didn't come. When I called him, he apologized. Kelly suddenly wanted some cake. That store closes early, so I came here to get it for her first. When he said her name, he sounded helpless yet indulgent, as if he was happy to do it even if it was tiring. Joe, I'm sorry. Ethan apologized again. My smile froze on my face. Sorry for what? He just went to get a cake first. He explained the reason clearly. The store closes early, and if he picked me up first, he might not get it in time. He was just weighing the pros and cons. But why did it still make me feel so bitter? Later, I told him not to come back to get me and took a cab to the hospital, picking up a bouquet of baby's breath on the way. When I arrived at the hospital, Ethan was already there. As soon as I walked in, I saw him feeding the girl on the bed some cake. The girl looked pure and lovely, with a bit of cream on her lips, pointing at a wedding dress in a magazine asking him which one looked nice. Ethan wiped the cream off her lips, his Adam's apple moving slightly, saying they all looked good. The scene was so beautiful I didn't want to interrupt it. Even the nurse giving the girl and 4 joked, you two make such a lovely couple. Ethan didn't deny it, just skillfully tucked the girl in. When he saw me, he hesitated, then pulled out a smile. Joe, you're here. The girl looked over at his voice. I quickly put away the bit of jealousy I felt inside and walked in calmly. I didn't expect you to be here before me. Kelly, I hope you get well soon. I handed her the bouquet. The girl smiled and thanked me, her face showing no hostility, looking innocent and sweet like a girl who didn't know much about the world. But as she was about to take the bouquet, a distinct hand grabbed it first. Kelly is allergic to pollen. She breaks out in rashes when she touches it. Joe, you should have asked me first if you were planning to buy something. If gentle blame had a name, it would be Ethan. Even though it was clearly my fault for buying the wrong thing, he spoke in such a soft way, making it impossible for me to be angry. I forced a smile. Sorry, I acted on my own. Oh, it's okay. Ethan overreacted, the girl on the bed said kindly with a smile. It's my fault I scared him before. On our first date, I didn't tell him I was allergic to pollen. He brought me flowers, and I broke out in rashes. He was so scared he carried me and ran 3 kilometers. This fool didn't know he could take a taxi then. The girl laughed shyly, brightening the dull room. No wonder Ethan liked her so much. She really was something special, especially at stirring things up. Ethan noticed I was upset and pulled me into a private bathroom when he went to get water. Sorry, I shouldn't have snapped at you earlier. He hugged me and apologized, his lips brushing my ear teasingly, trying to please me. I pushed my hands against his chest, avoiding his touch. Stop it, Ethan. I don't like this. Ethan chuckled softly, his mischievous hand sliding under my shirt, then to somewhere else. Don't like it. I trembled lightly, biting my lip in silence. Just as he was about to kiss me, we suddenly heard a scream, followed by the sound of breaking glass from outside. Ethan shoved me away without a second thought and rushed out. What happened? Why are you out of bed without shoes again? My waist slammed hard against the sink, and the intense pain left my mind blank for a moment. I could hear Ethan's angry voice outside the door. I laughed at myself, tears welling up in my eyes. I pulled down my shirt and walked out. I saw a glass shattered at the girl's feet. Ethan picked her up lovingly and walked her to the hospital bed. Even though he screamed fiercely, he was gentle when he set the girl down. Every move seemed carefully planned, full of care. The girl bashfully stuck out her tongue and apologized softly while holding onto his arm. "Sorry, Ethan. I just wanted some water, but my hand slipped." Ethan's face was stern as he asked, "Are you hurt?" Such a clean freak, yet here he was holding another girl's foot in his hands. I remember once I wore his pajamas, and he never touched me again after that. They looked like an inseparable couple, with the girl's chest pressed directly against Ethan's arm. My mind was a mess. Though I was Ethan's girlfriend, I somehow felt like I didn't belong there. Ethan continued to go to the hospital every day, and after I visited once, I never went back. In just a month, he spent more time with that girl than with me, his official girlfriend. The girl frequently called Ethan away from my side. Sometimes, even at night, when we had just gone to bed, she would call, "Ethan, my chest hurts. I feel like I'm dying. Can you come be with me? Ethan, I dreamed we couldn't finish our wedding before I died. Can you not leave me? Ethan, when will my wedding dress be ready? Have we invited the guests? I'm getting so anxious these days. Am I about to die?" She always seemed to have endless reasons. I tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Can you not go tonight?" Ethan frowned, looking annoyed. "Joe, I've been really tired lately. Don't be difficult. Kelly needs my care right now. But I need you too. Lately, I've been unwell. My stomach problems, which have bothered me for years, have been acting up again. They keep me up at night, hurting." Ethan left anyway, and didn't come back the entire night. The next day he came back, but only to pack a few toiletries before heading out again. I woke up and asked him what he was doing. He frowned, looking troubled. "Kelly's anxiety is getting worse. She needs constant care. I'm planning to stay at the hospital." Hearing this, a sense of hopeless coldness spread through me. I didn't stop him again. It was pointless. It would just lead to him saying, "She's a patient." But I really wanted to ask Ethan if his diligent care of his ex-girlfriend was solely because she was sick. Kelly asked me to go to a bridal shop to try on wedding dresses. I didn't know how she got my number, or why she wanted me to come along. Ethan went to book the venue and set up everything. I told him to keep it simple, but he insisted on making it formal. Kelly clung to my arm like we were sisters, explaining all this with a blush on her pretty face, looking far from sick. I still went, not for any particular reason, just to see how far Ethan would go for her. I didn't expect to feel jealous. When I proposed marriage to Ethan, he always said he was too busy and that planning a wedding was too much hassle. But now, Ethan, who hated hassle, was skipping work to personally prepare for another girl's wedding. I used to think Ethan was rational and composed about relationships, but really, his love wasn't rational. He simply wasn't impulsive for me. It wasn't until I saw him tenderly caring for another girl that I realized he could love someone openly and grandly. The girl beside me continued, "Ethan and I always had a regret. Years ago, when we dated, we fantasized about the future. I hoped he'd play the piano for me in a hall full of pink roses, and I'd walk to him in a white wedding dress. Pink roses, playing the piano. So when I once asked Ethan what our wedding would look like, and he casually said he'd play the piano for me as I walked through pink roses, it wasn't for me. It was a promise he made to her." Kelly seemed to be moved by her own story, gripping my hand with tear-filled eyes. "Joe, I'm really grateful. In the years I was away, you took such good care of Ethan for me. You don't know, when I told Ethan we should break up, he chased me abroad. He looked for me for 3 days and nights in a foreign place, almost getting hit by a car. I was really scared he'd fall apart back then, but thankfully, you got him through that dark time. I couldn't listen anymore. I couldn't understand. If they loved each other so much, why break up? All these years, who have I been in a relationship with? During all these years with Ethan, did he think about spending our lives together, or just regret not being with someone else?" At that moment, I couldn't see anything clearly. Kelly also told me, "I didn't intend to take Ethan back at first. After all, you've been with him for so long. I didn't want to be a third wheel. But Joe, you don't know, on the night I returned to the country, Ethan got drunk and messaged me, asking if I'd marry him. I just replied yes, and he drove to my place. In the dark hallway, he kissed me so passionately. It was so close, we almost, but he realized I gave my first time to someone else. So he got angry and left. When he regained his senses, he said he'd take responsibility for you and wouldn't engage with me anymore." When she said that, the girl had a smug look on her face, like she believed she could get my boyfriend back just by snapping her fingers. I felt completely dazed. No wonder Ethan was unusually passionate the night he got drunk. It wasn't just the alcohol. He hadn't been satisfied with someone else and wanted to vent with me. Thinking back on the 5 years I spent with him, I felt like a joke. Seeing the girl's self-satisfied expression, I was shaking with rage and slapped her. How dare you act so proud of being a homewrecker? Do you have no parents? As I turned to leave, I felt a hard push on my back. Falling down the stairs, my mind went blank. My phone suddenly rang. It was Ethan, busy planning a wedding for another girl. I lay on the hospital operating table, dizzy and unable to hear what people around me were saying. I only heard one voice. The patient is 5 weeks pregnant. There's bleeding in her lower body and head. For her safety, we need to perform an emergency procedure. Panic surged in my heart. 5 weeks pregnant. I was pregnant. No, I didn't want the procedure. I didn't want to lose my baby. I struggled to lift my hand and grab the doctor's sleeve, but I was too tired. Before I could speak, I passed out again. When I woke up, the noise was gone, replaced by the cold beep 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 of a ventilator. The smell of disinfectant filled the air. I lay in the hospital bed, dazed for a moment, and couldn't help touching my belly. The baby, gone. Just then, the doctor came to check on me, looking serious. I'm sorry, Ms. Joe. Your medical report has just come in. You've been diagnosed with stage 3 stomach cancer. You need immediate treatment, but your family hasn't arrived at the hospital yet. In the ward, other patients had family members by their bedside. I was the only one alone. The doctor said they'd tried calling someone named Ethan during my emergency, but he didn't pick up. My contact list had only bosses and colleagues left. The doctor said, Ms. Joe, you can't delay your treatment. Please contact a family member urgently. We need them here during the surgery. With that, he left. Since a long time ago, my parents divorced and remarried. Neither wanted me. They left me with my grandma in the countryside, never even calling. 2 years ago, Grandma passed away too, leaving me entirely alone. Heaven is always unfair, taking one thing from me and then everything else. I once asked my grandma if it was because I was unpleasant that my parents didn't want me. In that hot summer, she waved her fan and gently patted my back with her dry, leathery hand. Our Joe isn't unpleasant. The ones who don't want you are blind and wicked. One day, you'll meet someone who will never leave you. But Grandma, where is that person? Will they find me? In those scorching summers, her touch and scent made up all my childhood memories. Until she passed away, I felt completely abandoned. The phone by my bed rang. I asked the nurse changing my fall bag to answer it. Ethan's tired voice came through. Joe, Kelly said you hit her today. Can you stop causing trouble? I know you've been upset lately, but she's a patient. Can't you show some kindness to a dying person? My vision blurred. Tears slid down my temples, soaking the pillow. Ethan continued. I didn't call to blame you but to tell you that Kelly's condition is under control. The doctor said if she recovers well, she could live a long, healthy life. I'm not going to marry her, but we need to take some time to think about our relationship. Her condition is controlled, but I'm dying. Listening to his cold voice, I laughed bitterly. Ethan, there's no need to think. Someone as pretentious as you isn't worth my time. We're breaking up. My best friend from high school, Annie, called me. We reminisced about many fun high school memories. Then she asked, how are you? Are things okay lately? I had just shaved my head and looked at my pale reflection, forcing a smile through my tears. Doing fine. How about you? I'm great. Annie paused, then excitedly talked about her husband and how well he treated her, how obedient their child was, and how considerate her in-laws were. As she laughed loudly, just like before, my heart broke. She said we had both achieved the happiness we dreamed of. I silently cried, covering my mouth so she wouldn't hear. Annie, I haven't. How I wish to go back. But it's impossible. We talked for a long time. Since she got married, we rarely kept in touch. Each call was just to catch up. Knowing she's happy reassured me. After all, at least one of us should be happy. When the call ended, I was exhausted. Ethan kept calling, but I didn't answer. I blocked him on everything. I sued his beloved girl for attempted murder, for killing my baby. I have no family left. I must protect myself, even if I'm dying. I'll never let those who hurt me off easily. Ethan found out somehow, left work, and rushed to the hospital. Joe, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were hurt. He stood at the hospital room door, unsure of himself, and too scared to come in. Get out. I closed my eyes, not wanting to see him, and tears slipped down the corners of my eyes. But he still came in. Just like always, he didn't take what I said seriously at all. Ethan squatted down in front of me, his eyes red, carefully holding my hand and apologizing. Joe, I really know I was wrong. Please, don't be mad anymore. I've already yelled at Kelly. She didn't mean to push you down. We can have another baby. Don't get yourself worked up. He went on and on, probably thinking he was being considerate. What a shame. I would never trust him again. He just made me sick now. I shook off his hand and smiled through the tears. Ethan, I used to think you were just blind. I didn't expect your brain to be broken, too. Go check the security footage at the bridal shop to see if she did it on purpose. No need to tell me to let it go. Just seeing you reminds me of how smug she was, bragging about almost sleeping with you. Joe, Ethan panicked, trying to hold my hand again, but I didn't give him the chance. My chest hurt like it was being sliced by a knife. I looked at him coldly and said, Ethan, my baby is dead. Our baby is dead. And you're no different from that woman. You're both murderers. Ethan's eyes widened and he stepped back. His face turned from sad to a pale mess. I didn't want to look at him anymore. I rolled over and lay back down. Get out and never come back to disgust me. I was afraid I might kill him if I stayed, to avenge my dead child. Kelly called me, demanding what I had said to Ethan, why he suddenly changed his mind about marrying her. Someone nearly facing lawsuits, still thinking about love. I couldn't help but laugh. Kelly, do you really think Ethan loves you? No, he doesn't love anyone. Otherwise, he wouldn't agree to marry you while still pining for me. Kelly got furious and cursed me out over the phone. Ethan's voice suddenly broke in. Kelly, how many times have I told you not to bother Joe? How can you be so unreasonable? I felt indifferent, but somewhat mocked. See, Ethan doesn't love her that much either, but he doesn't love me either. His love was always selfish, indulging his desires between two women. He wanted to marry a considerate Kelly, while refusing to let go of his cute, clingy ex. But I wasn't playing this game anymore. I hung up and sent the evidence my detective gathered about Ethan and Kelly's affair to his boss. In the past, I had added his boss's wife's contact to help Ethan build connections. Never thought I'd use it against him today. Time flies, and we've both changed too much. The lawyer handling Kelly's lawsuit came just after I finished chemo. A familiar face made me pause. Is it you? I lay on the hospital bed, drenched in sweat from the pain, barely able to speak. The mirror on the table reflected my pale, ghost-like face. So ugly. The man in front of my bed wore a suit, looking sharp and handsome, his thick brows furrowed tightly. How did you end up like this? I gave a weak smile. Ask your good friend. Chase was Ethan's old friend. When I first met him on a blind date, I mistook him for my date. After a long chat, I realized my mistake. Back then, I felt relieved because Chase was too good looking. If we were together, I'd have to deal with many admirers. So when I later met Ethan, I was smitten instantly, not just because he saved me, but because he had a calm and unique aura. While he wasn't as striking as Chase, he looked better the more I saw him. I thought I chose the right person, but reality slapped me hard. Character has nothing to do with looks. A naturally greedy person will still cheat no matter how honest they look. Chase smiled faintly at my words. I haven't been in touch with Ethan for a long time. I was taken aback and wanted to ask why, but the pain was too much, and my stomach felt like it was being twisted. I turned pale and vomited by the bed. Sorry, embarrassed you. I lay weakly on the bed, my hair slick with sweat, sticking to my face. Even without a mirror, I could imagine how awful I looked. So pathetic. Chase didn't say a word, picked up the trash can I had just vomited in. Just rest and don't overthink, he said, then carried the waste away. I watched his back, bitterly smiling after a long while. Even strangers didn't mind my condition, yet Ethan got mad at me for staining the bedsheets during my period. Too bad I just realized this now. If someone loves or doesn't, it's really obvious. Chase promised he wouldn't go easy on Ethan for old time's sake. He submitted all evidence of Kelly's wrongdoings to the court, officially suing her. I heard Ethan was frantically looking for a lawyer to represent Kelly. He even came to the hospital to harass me, talking about how Kelly helped him after his parents died, saying this was the last time he'd help her. It made me want to puke. He probably believes his own lies after saying them so much. He never admitted he still loved Kelly, using gratitude and sympathy as excuses for cheating. Would he dare face our dead child years from now? I begged Chase to make sure that woman paid. He agreed and destroyed Ethan and Kelly's lawyers in court. In the end, we won the case. Kelly was not only found guilty of killing my child, but also had a history of drug use. She had been caught by the police abroad twice, and the last time she came out of rehab, she was diagnosed with mid-stage cancer. The day she met Ethan, she was out of money and had fled back home, hoping to latch onto Ethan. Little did she know, she wouldn't even have to try hard. Ethan eagerly fell into her lap. In the end, Kelly was sentenced to 5 years. If I weren't in so much pain, I would have wanted to see her downfall with my own eyes. But I did see Ethan's downfall. When he came to find me, he was a different man. His face was unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, and his suit was wrinkled beyond recognition. Back when we were together, I used to iron his clothes every night to make sure he looked presentable, but he never knew what I did for him. Once, he took me to a dinner with his colleagues, and they all said he lived a meticulous life, because his clothes were always perfect. He paused and said it must be because of the quality of the clothes, not any effort on his part. I didn't say anything at the time, thinking he was just a clueless guy. Now I understand. He never saw anyone else's effort. Ethan knelt in front of me, crying for forgiveness. Joe, you've vented your anger. You've got your revenge. Can you please stop being mad at me? I know what I did hurt you, but I finally realize how important you are to me. I can't live without you. Without you, I can't live in that house. Joe, let's get married. Didn't you say you wanted a home with me? If we get married, we will have a home. He knelt, holding a diamond ring, speaking with deep conviction, but he seemed to forget. I no longer needed him to give me a home. When I was little, my parents divorced and abandoned me, even selling our home. Later, they each remarried and had other children, so I was the unwanted one. I drifted between the homes of my aunts and uncles, until my ailing grandmother took me in and cared for me in the countryside. Perhaps because I never felt the warmth of parental love, I always longed for a home. I wanted someone to be with me, and a place that belonged to me. With Ethan, my idea of a home became him. Wherever he was, that was home. But I didn't realize until now that longing turned into delusion. Ethan didn't love me, and he wasn't my home. I slapped him hard across the face. Get out. I don't want to marry you anymore. Just a few rounds of chemotherapy had already worn me out. Old colleagues came to visit me in the hospital after hearing about my illness, but Chase came the most. One day, he came with a bruise on his mouth. I was lying on the hospital bed and laughed when I saw him. Who hit you? He deftly cleared the trash from my bedside, washed his hands, and started massaging my shoulders and neck. Ethan, he said, with a noticeable anger in his voice. My smile faded a bit. Why? Chase wouldn't say the real reason, only muttering. Just couldn't stand the guy. I've always wanted to hit him, but what he didn't know was that Ethan had already called me. Ethan thought I was with Chase. He said that at a dinner when I was asleep on the couch, Chase kissed me while he was drunk. I had no idea about it back then. Ethan called Chase a scoundrel, coveting his friend's woman. It was then I understood why Ethan and Chase, once the best of friends, had fallen out. Turns out, it was because of me. Over the phone, Ethan tearfully asked, Joe, did I make a mistake? How did we end up like this? I loved you. Listening to his hoarse, painful voice, I couldn't help but tear up. Not out of pity, but because it reminded me of all the moments I loved Ethan. In our first winter together, Ethan went on a business trip to a neighboring city. He was supposed to be back in 3 days, but on the first night, I had a severe stomachache. After calling him and taking some medicine, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I saw a figure moving around. It was Ethan, who had come back early without even changing his clothes, cooking porridge for me by the bed. Surprised, I asked why he had returned early. I was worried, he replied, with a calm tone that warmed my heart for many years. From then on, I stayed by his side without complaint. Even though he never mentioned marriage, I was willing to wait for him. But Ethan was ultimately too selfish. How can one heart love two people at the same time? Chase saw my silence and thought I was feeling sorry for Ethan. With a hoarse voice, he asked, do you still like him? I smiled and shook my head, looking out at the sunlight. My thoughts drifted to that afternoon I went on that blind date. After work, I rushed to the cafe for the date and mistakenly approached a man reading by the window, thinking he was my date. Under the dazzling sun, his handsome yet serene profile caught my breath. I walked up, breathless, and greeted him. Hi, I'm Joe. Auntie set up this date. He looked up, surprised, then his gaze softened. If it hadn't been for that incident with the troublemaker, we might have kept the misunderstanding going, and the ending would have been different now. But, who can say for sure? Maybe from that mistaken start, we were always destined to go wrong. That afternoon, a woman suddenly burst into my hospital room. Joe, I had just finished my 3rd round of chemo, losing 20 pounds. Hearing the voice, I weakly turned towards the door. Annie, is that you? My best friend, who had just called to ask how I was doing, was now standing in my room. You idiot, how did you become like this? Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Annie cried, rushing in to hit me. Though her punches were light, they felt like mosquito bites. I teared up, but kept smiling. I didn't want to disturb your life. Why did you lie to me? You said you were doing well. There used to be a time when Annie loved looking pretty. She'd curl her hair, paint her nails with the prettiest designs, and go on a diet at the slightest weight gain. But now, she goes without makeup, wears the simplest clothes, ties her hair in a low ponytail, and her body looks a bit swollen. She looks nothing like the young, vibrant Annie, I remember. Annie sobbed. I just wanted you to be okay. So I didn't tell you about the messy stuff at home. Who would have thought you'd hide something so big from me? Why did you turn out like this? We were fine the last time we met. I chuckled dryly. You forget how many years it's been since we last saw each other. The last time was when her little one was born, 5 years ago now. 5 years is enough to change so many things. The once clear-eyed girl now has eyes filled with exhaustion. So, what happened with you and David? Is he treating you badly? I helped wipe away Annie's tears, my heart aching. But I could no longer stand up for her like I used to with the annoying guys who upset her. Annie got married the year we graduated college. Unlike me, she married the boy she had loved since she was young. On her wedding day, I personally saw her off. Her smile was so sweet that she seemed the happiest person in the world, and for many years, I believed she was still happy. Yet now, Annie calmly told me, David and I are preparing for a divorce. I've hated this home for 7 years. I was utterly shocked. How could it be? Everyone who knew Annie and David knew that David adored her so much, he'd have plucked the stars from the sky for her. In high school, even when the school was strict about banning romances, David professed his love to Annie in front of the entire school under the flag. They dated for years, and upon graduating from college, David proposed. On the day of the wedding, David promised all their old classmates that he would treat Annie well for life. How did they go from that to divorce in just a few years? Talking about it, Annie appeared somewhat composed. She smirked wryly. No matter how sweet a relationship is before marriage, it changes once you're married. Actually, David has always been kind to me. We got pregnant before marriage, and during my pregnancy, I was so burdened by my belly that I couldn't breathe and couldn't sleep at night. David had just started working then. He had to go to work during the day and stay up with me at night, trying to comfort me to sleep. It was tiring, but still kind of sweet. But later, there were just too many petty issues. 1 or 2 days, he could handle staying up with me, but by the 3rd or 4th day, he began to wear out. Over the years, we went from talking about everything to nothing. Our daily conversations only revolved around the kids and in-laws. A while ago, I found out he cheated. In our 7-year marriage, he cheated twice. The first time, he had a 2-year-long affair with another woman. As Annie spoke, her voice inevitably became shaky and choked up. She threw herself into my arms, crying and asking, why did we end up like this? We had so many aspirations, so much hope. We planned to be happy together. How did we end up going our separate ways? Almost like strangers. Yeah, I didn't understand either. The beautiful future I had imagined in my youth, the years of hard work after graduation. Why did it all end up like this? After that, Annie stayed by my side every day, taking care of me. We promised to travel once I got better, to visit all the places we once dreamed of but never got to see, and then open a little coffee shop in a seaside town. But I could feel my body getting worse. At night, I often woke up coughing up a big mouthful of blood, my internal organs feeling out of place with pain that made me break out in a sweat. Chase came to take care of me too. He and Annie took turns almost every day. At night, I'd be in so much pain, tossing around in bed and having seizures. Afraid they'd hear, I'd bury myself under the quilt, biting my teeth to keep the groans of pain inside. Nights were getting longer and longer for me. I had never looked forward to the next day as much as I did now. Only when the sun rose did my pain ease a little. One night, I dreamed of my grandma. She looked just like how I remembered her, not a bit older. I clung to her arm and cried out in pain, Grandma, it hurts. It really hurts. Her voice choked with tears, not knowing what to do, just like when I was little, holding me and gently patting my back to comfort me to sleep. The next day, Chase was unusually silent. Maybe he heard me crying out in pain last night, but I felt significantly better. Probably because I had dreamt of Grandma. The pain seemed to dissipate overnight. Feeling better, my mood improved. Annie was at a parent-teacher meeting today, so Chase took a day off to stay with me. I asked him to take me out for a walk. Ever since I got sick, I hadn't breathed fresh air for so long, always surrounded by the smell of disinfectant. There's a newly opened amusement park near the hospital. I had never been to one, so I asked him to take me there. At first, he refused. Your body isn't ready yet. Can't it wait a bit longer? I shook my head. No, I want to go today. After I said that, I realized how spoiled I sounded. Before, I would never have dared to talk to Ethan like that, afraid he'd get angry or turn me down. But now, I found myself saying it to Chase, and so naturally too. Chase couldn't argue with me and reluctantly agreed. All right, but no exciting rides. He helped me put on a shawl and brought me a hat. Oddly, since chemo, my hair had all fallen out, but Chase never minded. Had it been Ethan, he wouldn't have wanted to look at me like this. But Ethan seemed different now too, no longer going to work and frequently visiting me at the hospital. I wouldn't let him into my room, so he waited outside every day. A few times, getting up at night to use the bathroom, I saw him huddled in a corner, head in his hands, shoulders shaking like he was crying. Yet at that moment, I felt nothing. I just realized, I have truly let him go. I used to think I couldn't live without him, but now I see, it's no big deal. Who can't live without someone in this world? The pain is always temporary. When I found out Chase was taking me to the amusement park, Ethan immediately said no. He begged me with teary eyes, utterly humble. "Joe, can we wait until you're feeling better? It's windy outside. What if you catch a cold?" For a moment, I felt Ethan was genuinely scared of losing me, but it no longer matters to him. Why cling to a dying person like me, Ethan? Go find someone you truly love, and stop bothering me. I glanced at him expressionlessly, then walked away with Chase. Who would have thought? Just half a month ago, I hated Ethan with all my heart. Now, I can talk to him calmly. Ethan must have noticed my change. His eyes reddened instantly. He blocked my way urgently. His voice choked. "Joe, do you really not love me anymore?" I felt a bit impatient. I've answered this question so many times. Why does he keep asking? No, I don't love you anymore, Ethan. Can't you have a bit of self-awareness? Must I spell it out so clearly? After we left the hospital, Chase looked at me worriedly. Are you really okay? You still love him, don't you? I quietly looked at the rising sun in the distance and forced a smile. No, I really don't. Even if I have any feelings left for him, it's just regret for everything I invested in him. Despite all my efforts, I never got what I wanted. It's a pity. I only understood at the end that what you can't get should be let go of early. Life is only lived once. I should live it for myself. Luckily, it's not too late to understand this now. I had Chase take me to the amusement park near the hospital. I tried all the rides I once wanted to play, laughed freely when I went wild. Chase was initially worried about my health, tensed and not willing to relax. But seeing I was fine, he eventually smiled too. We ran to a Ferris wheel. Excitedly, I pointed to the top. "Chase, I want to go up there." It said that people go to high places after death. I wanted to know in advance if I'd be scared of heights. Chase was carrying a bunch of stuff I had bought, bunny ears, ice cream, plus my coat. Without a hint of impatience, full of affection, he looked at me and said, "Okay, wait here. I'll go get the tickets." After that, he turned and walked away. As he turned, I suddenly felt dizzy. Panic surged through me. In the next second, I collapsed to the ground. Before I passed out, I saw Chase dropping the things in his hands, rushing towards me in large strides. "Joe, don't sleep. Wake up. Joe, Joe, Joe." Chase carried me, pushed through the crowd, and ran crazily towards the hospital. Something hit my face, warm and wet. Was Chase crying? I fought to open my eyes, trying to see clearly, but only saw blurred figures. There were Annie, Ethan, and Chase. In the end, I never figured out if he cried. I died on the cold operating table. The doctors took turns doing CPR, but they couldn't save me. After death, my soul floated above the hospital, watching as Annie fainted from grief. Ethan wept holding my body, and Chase seemed numb, soul crushed, standing at the door, almost knocked over several times. When Ethan wanted to take my body for burial, Chase suddenly rushed over and punched him. "Don't taint her with your dirty hands." Chase clenched his teeth, his red eyes filled with pain and regret. He said, "Ethan, my biggest regret was letting you have her 5 years ago. This time, I won't give up." Chase personally handled my funeral. I had shared with him about my grandmother, so he buried me next to her. It rained heavily that day. Chase, dressed in a black suit, held a black umbrella, just as breathtaking as when I first met him. Standing before my grave, with red and wet eyes, he said, "Joe, love me in the next life, okay? I've liked you for so many years." I was deeply moved, softly responding to him. Let's see, Chase, who can say for sure about the next life? If there really is another life, I only dare to wish for a happy family, a healthy grandmother, and my child to come to me again.